The rain had been falling since morning, tracing delicate silver lines across the window panes. The house felt emptier than usual. My husband, Mark, had left early for his business trip, another 3 days away, and silence wrapped around every corner like a blanket I didn't ask for. I made coffee just to fill the air with something warm. The scent drifted through the living room, blending with the sound of the storm outside. That's when I heard the knock. It was Daniel, Mark's best friend. He stood at the doorway, soaked from the rain, his dark jacket clinging to him. "Hey, sorry for dropping by unannounced," he said with an awkward smile. "Mark told me you might need help with the heating system. He mentioned it's been acting up." I blinked, surprised. "Oh, yes, it stopped working yesterday." He smiled faintly. "Then I'm just in time." Daniel had always been polite, maybe a little reserved. But that evening, something about him felt different. Calmer, yet strangely heavy. He walked in, carrying that scent of rain and cold air with him, and for the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel so empty. He fixed the heater, crouched by the corner of the room, hands steady, focused. The flickering light from the storm illuminated his face, quiet, thoughtful, distant. I noticed tiny details I had never paid attention to before. The faint scar near his jaw, the way he pressed his lips together when thinking, the small sigh he let out when the heater finally came to life. "There," he said softly, turning toward me. "Should be fine now." "Thank you," I replied, smiling more warmly than I intended. We sat in the living room for a while afterward, mostly listening to the rain. It was one of those silences that didn't feel awkward but full, like both of us were thinking too many things we couldn't say. He looked around the house, then back at me. "It feels strange without him here, doesn't it?" I nodded. "It does. It's quieter. Sometimes too quiet." He hesitated before speaking again. "Mark, he's been really busy lately." I sighed. "I know. I understand. But still, it's like we live in the same house but on different planets. He talks about deadlines and meetings, and I talk to walls." Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at me, really looked, in a way Mark hadn't in months. Not judging, not pitying, just seeing. "That's hard," he said quietly. "You deserve to be heard." Those words landed heavier than they should have. Something warm stirred in my chest, something dangerous and confusing. I tried to brush it off with a smile. "You always know the right thing to say." He laughed lightly. "Not always. Sometimes I say too much." The storm grew louder outside. A flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by thunder that made the windows tremble. I instinctively flinched, spilling a bit of coffee on my hand. "Hey, careful," Daniel said, quickly reaching for a napkin. His fingers brushed mine, brief, accidental, but enough to send a quiet current through the air. We both froze for a second. Then I pulled my hand away, pretending to focus on the rain. He leaned back on the couch, watching the window. "You ever wonder when people start drifting apart? Like, one day everything feels right, and then you wake up and realize you're strangers?" I turned to look at him, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "All the time," I admitted. "It doesn't happen suddenly, though. It's small things. Missed dinners. Unspoken words. Silence where laughter used to be." He smiled sadly. "Yeah, silence can be louder than any argument." For a long while we just sat there. The clock ticked softly. The heater hummed. The storm outside slowly began to fade, leaving behind a kind of peace that felt fragile. Daniel glanced at the family photo on the wall. Mark and me, smiling in the sunlight, carefree and happy. "You two looked perfect there," he said. I followed his gaze. "We were. Or maybe we thought we were." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. There was no intention, no plan, just unspoken empathy that felt too intimate to name. "I should probably go," he said after a while, his voice lower, uncertain. "It's still raining," I said quietly. "You'll get soaked again." He gave a half smile. "I don't mind." But I did. The idea of the door closing again, of the house slipping back into silence, felt unbearable. "Stay until it stops," I said before I could stop myself. He hesitated, searching my face, maybe trying to read what I meant. Finally, he nodded. Okay. He sat back down, this time a little closer, not enough to cross any line, but enough to feel his presence more clearly. We talked about small things. The weather, old memories, silly stories about Mark. We laughed once or twice, and it felt strange but good, like remembering what warmth felt like. And yet beneath it all, there was tension. A quiet, growing pulse neither of us wanted to name. The rain softened to a drizzle, then to silence. He looked toward the window, then back at me. Guess I should go now. I wanted to say something, to ask him to stay a little longer, but the words never came. Thank you for fixing the heater, I said instead. He smiled gently. Anytime. He stood, walked to the door, then turned back once more. Take care of yourself, okay? When the door closed behind him, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same anymore. It carried the echo of a voice that had seen me in a way I hadn't been seen for a long time. And as I stood there, staring at the rain-soaked doorway, I realized something had shifted, quietly, invisibly, inside both of us. That night, I barely slept. The sound of rain lingered in my mind, mingled with Daniel's quiet voice and the look in his eyes before he left. It was an attraction, not exactly, more like a sudden awareness of loneliness that had been living with me for months, maybe years. When I woke up, the house felt colder than usual again. Mark had called, his voice crisp and distant. How's everything? He asked. Fine. I lied. He talked about work, meetings, deadlines. Not once did he ask how I was. When the call ended, I stared at the silent phone for a long time, feeling like a stranger in my own life. By afternoon, the sky had cleared, but the storm inside me hadn't. I walked into the living room and saw the mug Daniel had used still sitting by the window. I should have washed it, but I didn't. It was ridiculous, a simple coffee cup, yet somehow it carried the warmth of that evening. Around 5, there was another knock at the door. My heart jumped before my mind caught up. It was him again. Daniel. Hey, he said softly. I forgot my umbrella here last night. He held out a small, awkward smile. I blinked, realizing I had seen an umbrella near the couch earlier. Come in, I said quietly. It's still wet outside. He hesitated a moment, then stepped inside. The room looked the same as last night, but it felt different, charged, expectant. We talked again, at first about nothing important. He told me about a project he was working on, how Mark used to help him with designs years ago. I laughed at something small he said, and for a brief moment, the heaviness in my chest lifted. Then there was silence. Not empty silence, that kind that holds everything you're afraid to say. Daniel looked down, then spoke quietly. I didn't sleep much last night. I kept thinking about what you said about feeling like strangers. I swallowed. Me too. He met my eyes, and there it was again, that quiet honesty that made me feel seen. It's strange, he said. Sometimes you spend so much time next to people and still feel completely alone. Then someone just listens, and suddenly it matters. His words hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened. Daniel, I don't know what's happening, but this. He interrupted gently. I know. I'm not trying to cross any line. He paused, then added, I just don't want you to feel invisible. Invisible? That word stayed in the air between us like a confession. I looked at him, really looked, the way you do when you realize you've been waiting for someone to understand without explanation. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. A car passed outside. The light shifted through the window, painting the floor in gold and shadow. Daniel stood, walked to the window, then turned back. Mark's a good guy, he said quietly. He just doesn't see what he has. He used to, I whispered. He came closer, not touching, just close enough that I could hear his breath. Maybe he forgot. People do that when they stop looking at what matters. My heart was pounding. I wanted to step back, to breathe, to break the moment, but I didn't. Because for the first time in so long, I didn't feel invisible. Then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I should go before I say something I can't take back. I nodded, though part of me wanted him to stay. He took his umbrella, hesitated at the door. "You deserve more than silence, you know," he said softly. And then he was gone. That evening, I sat by the window watching the sun sink. My reflection stared back at me. The same face, but not quite. I felt changed, like I'd been reminded of something I'd forgotten, that I still mattered. When Mark came home 2 days later, I expected the same routine, the quick hello, the tired smile. But something in me had shifted. "How was the trip?" I asked. He barely looked up. "Exhausting." Then, as usual, he started checking his phone. I watched him, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry, just sad. Sad that we had let so much silence grow between us. "Mark," I said quietly, "do you ever feel like we stopped being us?" He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time we actually talked? Not about work or groceries, about us." He frowned, uncertain, then sighed. "You know how things are. I've been busy." "Always busy," I said. "But we're still here, right? Isn't that supposed to mean something?" For a moment, he didn't reply. Then, almost reluctantly, he put the phone down. "What's wrong, Anna?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "Nothing's wrong. I just don't want to feel invisible anymore." That word again. Invisible. It hung in the air, heavy and real. Mark looked at me for a long time, as if really seeing me for the first time in months. "You're not invisible," he said quietly. "I've just been too blind to notice." He reached out, touched my hand, hesitant, uncertain, but genuine. Something inside me broke and healed all at once. We talked that night, really talked for hours. About the distance, the silence, the small things we both ignored. There were tears, laughter, awkward pauses, but it felt real again. As I went to bed later, I thought of Daniel, his words, his kindness, the quiet understanding he gave me when I needed it most. I didn't message him, didn't call. Some things are meant to remain unspoken, but never forgotten. Because sometimes, the person who enters your life for a brief moment doesn't stay. But they leave behind something that changes everything.